Hi everyone, welcome back to GCSE English. I hope you've all had a nice weekend. First of all, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that completed their paper 1 mock exam last week. We know it was really difficult. Some of you were on phones, we had internet issues, lots of distractions at home and stuff. So we appreciate your commitment and your hard work. Anybody that did not sit that mock exam last week for whatever reason, please stop this video now. Don't complete this work. Just go on that Google Meet and tell your tutor, and they will organise for you to do it now or for you to do it at another point this week. But please don't just ignore that. Remember, it forms part of the evidence that we'll be submitting for your centre assessed grade this summer. So it's really important that you complete it. Okay. All right, so welcome back to paper 2. Paper 2, remember, is the non-fiction paper. It's the one where we look at letters, articles, speeches, things like that, all based on real people and real life events. We've covered all the questions in paper 2 now, so we're just going to go back and we're going to do a quick recap for a couple of weeks of the reading questions, and then hopefully we'll be able to start practicing some writing when we're back in college. Okay, so first thing, have a look at the painting I've got on the screen. Might be a good idea if you're on that Meet chat. Can you put in the chat who you think the painter is? Extra bonus points if you know the name of the painting. Quite a famous painting, a famous painter. I'm sure you've all seen it before. Put in the Meet chat for us, name of the artist and name of the painting if you know it. All right, so what we're doing today then is we are going to be recapping question 1 and question 2 on paper 1. Question 1 requires you to identify obvious information in a non-fiction text. And question 2 requires you to explain how a writer expresses their thoughts and feelings. We do this, remember, by inferring meaning from the words and phrases that they use. And as always, and because it's really good practice, we want to organise our ideas into clear and coherent sentences. So we're not doing anything that you've not already practiced today. But it is all really good to keep practicing that, particularly number 2 there, the making inferences. All right, so if you didn't know, that painting was painted by Vincent van Gogh, really famous Dutch painter. Van Gogh, probably you know best for cutting off his ear, if you know him at all. Wasn't his entire ear though, it was only the earlobe. And the Starry Night, if anybody got that, was this painting here that I showed you. Probably one of his most famous paintings that he actually painted in an asylum that he voluntarily admitted himself to after he had a nervous breakdown. Unfortunately, Vincent van Gogh didn't, no, that's not true. I was going to say he didn't sell a single painting in his lifetime. That is not true. He sold one painting a few months before he died, I believe. He just did not get the recognition when he was alive for how talented he was. That's a self-portrait of him there on the screen right now. And obviously now he's, you know, I think probably his most famous painting has sold for millions and millions. And he painted about 900 paintings during his lifetime as a painter. So in less than 10 years, 900 paintings. Incredible. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we are going to read a letter that Van Gogh wrote to his brother and sister. He was a very prolific correspondent, Van Gogh. He wrote nearly as many letters as he did paintings, probably about 800 letters or something, again, in his adult life as a painter, mainly to his brother and one of his really close friends. So all I want you to do first is if you could go to Google Classroom, please. We're going to click on classwork and we're going to scroll down and we're going to find week 22. So week 22 should say Vincent van Gogh, paper 1, question 1, and paper 2, question 1 and question 2. Remember, you might only be able to see this video here. You might have to click on view assignment to be able to see the documents, of which there are 3 this week. Those documents should appear above your turn it in button, if that helps. So have a look around for them. The first thing that we need is this one. It's just called Van Gogh 19th century text, and it should look like this. It says letter from Vincent van Gogh. So all we're going to do is we're just going to read this through. This was written in June 1890. I believe that he actually died in July 1890, so it was not long before he died. If you could just open a copy of this, I'll read it out loud, that's no problem, but make sure that you are following on as well. Dear brother and sister, I am very saddened and have continued to feel the storm that threatens weighing upon me. What can be done? You see, I usually try to be quite good-humoured, but I am tired of this miserable place and feel my life is being attacked at the very root. I am trying to work, but suffering. Once I returned home from visiting you, spent with fatigue and crippled feet, in a more or less depressed state of mind, I tried to set to work again, but the brush was almost falling from my hands. Despite knowing clearly what I wanted to paint, I couldn't. I wanted to stand at my easel and paint stretches of wheat fields under turbulent skies, to make a point of trying to express my sadness and extreme loneliness through those lingering brushstrokes. I often think of when we were little and younger, and I believe that certainly it's better to bring up children than to spend all one's nervous energy in making paintings. But what can I do? I myself am now too old to retrace my steps, or to desire something else. Even in my work, I feel stuck. What have I done? I have failed in all aspects. All desire has left me. I very much regret not having seen you both more regularly, but I am not the sociable creature I once was. All I desire is to walk solitary through the churches and parsonages here. I wish I were far away from everything, for I am the cause of all, and bring only sorrow to everybody. I alone have brought all this misery on myself and others. Well, goodbye once more. I wish you luck and good heart and relative prosperity. Please tell Mother sometime that I think of her very often. Handshakes in thought. Ever yours, Vincent. Okay, so that is the extract, the document, the text, whatever you want to call it, that we are going to be using today to answer question 1 and question 2. The letter written by Vincent van Gogh to his brother and sister in June 1890. This is the 19th century text. All right. So question 1, quick recap. It's worth 3 marks. And it's where you're asked to find specific details using the first text in the exam. It's divided into 3 parts, so it'll say 1A, 1B, and 1C. It might ask you for obvious information, or it might ask you for implicit information, so suggested information. Just read the question really carefully. They're commonly sort of what, where, how, who questions, though. All right, so let's have a look at the questions. So read the letter from Van Gogh to his siblings and answer the following questions. So we've done that first bit. So 1A, what did Van Gogh want to paint? Where does he want to walk alone? Who does he think of often? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to complete that question. So if you want to pause the video there and answer that question. To answer the question, you're going to need to look at the text that we just read, but you're also going to need to click on this document here, week 22, your answers. This is where you're going to write your answers. So all you need to do here is just write question 1, and then you can put 1A and write your response, 1B, write your response, 1C, and then write your response. Pause the video now for me and answer the question. What did Van Gogh want to paint? Where does he want to walk alone? Who does he think of often? All right, well done. Let's go through the answers together. So 1A, what did Van Gogh want to paint? He wanted to paint stretches of wheat fields under turbulent skies. How do I know that? Because in this document, Here we go. Let me find it. He says, I wanted to paint, but I couldn't. I wanted to stand at my easel and paint stretches of wheat fields under turbulent skies. So as long as you put something along the lines of he wanted to paint stretches of wheat fields or wheat fields, that would have been absolutely fine. Okay, the next question. Where does he want to walk alone? Through churches and parsonages. Okay, so this was towards the end. I remember this. He says he's not very sociable anymore. Yeah. So he says, all I desire is to walk solitary through the churches and the parsonages here. Okay, and then the final question, who does he think of often? Okay, who does he think of often? It's not his brother and sister. He does say he regrets not seeing them both more regularly, but he actually says, please tell mother that I think of her very often. So the key words there, very often, it was his mother was the answer. So you can see they were all explicit pieces of information, weren't they? I didn't have to infer any meaning to find those answers. I just had to find keywords in the text. So paint, walk alone, and think of often. If I'd have looked for those three phrases, just scanned the text, I would have been able to find them really quickly. So give yourself a pat on the back if you got those three right. Well done. You've completed question 1. Nice and easy, isn't it? You can see those answers, they don't need to be lengthy. You can write them in your own words, or you could directly quote the text. It doesn't matter. But remember, this is a really quick question. It's not one where you have to analyze any language or say this suggests or anything. That is coming up shortly. Okay, so question 1 then, 3 marks. Specific information, it'll be 1A, 1B, 1C, might be obvious, might be suggested, but they will commonly be what, where, and how questions. All right, so question 2 involves us inferring meaning, and it also involves us looking at words and phrases and seeing if we can make connotations, connections, associations with them. That's what inferring's about, isn't it? It's about reading between the lines. So if I say to you, is it possible to tell how the painter, so Van Gogh, is it possible to tell how he felt by looking at this painting? What would you say? Hopefully you're saying yes. Yes, I think we could maybe come up with an idea of how he is feeling or how he felt when he painted this just by looking at it. But the key question is how. I mean, when I look at this, I look at what's there. I think of the colours. I can see those brush strokes. So I'd be thinking, okay, what do these things represent? So if I put this here, what can you see? What could these things represent? What about the shades of blue? Why is everything blue? There's a tinge of blue in all those little houses there. There's blue on the hills and the fields. There's blue in the sky. It almost looks like the sea. The only thing that's not blue is this large black tree that's in the foreground, which I think is supposed to be a cypress tree. We've got the brush strokes there. What do they look like? Are they quite graceful and dainty and fine and smooth? Or are they quite large and sort of turbulent? What's the vibe of those brush strokes? And finally, we've got the moon and the stars as well that are quite large. They're dominating the sky and they seem a little bit brighter to me than the rest of the painting. So what could those things represent? What I want you to do is pause this video and 5 minutes, just think about the shades of blue, the large black tree, the brush strokes, and the moon and the stars. And can you just make a note of what you think they could represent? So for example, if you go to your answers here, I'm just going to put shades of blue because that was the first thing. What could the shades of blue represent? Okay, well, blue is a cold colour, isn't it? So I might say it represents coldness. Oops, sorry, I won't spell it. Blue, when people describe feeling blue as well, it usually means that they feel sad, doesn't it? So I might also put blue could represent, again, I will get. I might say that the blue represents sadness here. Does blue have any other connotations for you? Makes me think of the sea. They actually make me think of waves when I look at that painting. But it's like a stormy sea. It's not a calm sea, is it? So perhaps that could represent how he felt. He was sad, and that was sort of the metaphor, if you like, for his sadness. Yeah, maybe things were a bit chaotic here, and that's what he's trying to represent through that sort of stormy, wavy sky. I don't know. I've never met Van Gogh and I've not studied history of art, but it seems like an intelligent response. And then the next thing I'd want you to do is just put the large black tree was the next one, wasn't it? So large black tree. And again, what do you think that could represent? So think of the color black. Think of where it is in the painting. So it's very large, it's in the foreground and it's dominating. What could that represent? So pause the video now for me and just complete that. Just 5 minutes. Remember, there's no wrong or right to this because it's completely your interpretation. I just want you to start thinking about connotations and associations. Okay, well done. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things that I've written down, and I'm not saying that I'm right. Again, I haven't studied this painting or anything like that. I did go to art college, but we didn't study Van Gogh. This is the stuff that I've written down. So the shades of blue, as we did together there, I've put coldness and sadness. I know we also wrote the waves or the stormy sea. For the large black tree, I've chosen dominating, darkness, deadness, fear, or mystery. Black to me represents those things. Black is a mysterious colour. It can also symbolize fear. The reason I've put dominating is because it sort of takes over the painting because of where it is in the foreground. The brushstrokes to me seem quite erratic. It's that idea of that stormy, turbulent sky that kind of looks like sea and waves, as if it's moving. Maybe it's supposed to represent the wind. I'm not sure, but it seems very erratic. It seems very turbulent, not very smooth and neat. Finally, I've got the moon and the stars there. The moon and the stars, these are the brightness in this picture to me. Maybe they're the warmth in the cold blue. Maybe they're symbolizing hope in some way. I've also, though, put the dark side of nature. So perhaps he's chosen to paint this at night time because it is that darkness that he wants to show us, because we only can see the moon and the stars when it's dark outside. All right, thank you for doing that. Hopefully it made sense to you. If it didn't, hopefully it will do in a second. The reason that I wanted you to think about that, because the question that I'm asking you now is, so is it possible to tell how Van Gogh felt then by reading his writing? So if we can look at how he might have felt by looking at the painting, so did he feel sad? Was he depressed? Is that what this dominating darkness is? Was he fearful? Was his mind and his thoughts erratic and stormy? Or was there hope there represented by the brightness? Is that what that painting represents? And if we could say that, can we make sense of his writing in that same way? I think that we can. And this is what we're going to try and do now. So just as we're using visual and we're thinking about colour and brushstrokes and content, we need to try and do the same thing with words and with structure and with the kind of vocabulary that he chooses to use, and maybe even the kind of metaphors or the similes that he chooses to use. Did they represent how he feels? So for question 2, we've kind of got to do exactly what you've just done with that painting. But instead of looking at a picture, we've got to look at the words and we've got to say, okay, what associations can I make with these words? So we've got to explain how he's presenting a specific point of view. We've got to embed those keywords and phrases from the text to support what we say. Remember, because if we don't support with quotes, we can't get the marks available in the high bands in the mark scheme. And you might be prompted to talk about language, tone, and structure here. Okay, so think of it in terms of colour or brush strokes. If it helps to think about what we've just done, we're going to try and look at language in the same way. So here's our question. It's a 10-mark question, remember. Paper 2 goes from a 3-marker straight to a 10-marker. So we should be spending about 15 minutes on this in an exam. How does Van Gogh try to show he is finding his life and work difficult? And we've got some bullet points. So what does he say? What does he say that makes us think, oh, he's finding it really difficult just to be alive and to paint today? What does he use in terms of language or tone or structure that might also help us see that he's finding things difficult? And then any other way you think that he's trying to show how hard he's finding his life and his work. So what we need to do is we need to go back to that text that you've got on Google Classroom. And this is where you need to start doing your highlighting, isn't it? So how does Van Gogh try to show he's finding his life and his work difficult? We need to track through this document from the beginning to the end, and we need to make a range of points. Remember, a range of points, I always recommend to you to try and make at least 8 in 15 minutes. I know that is quite challenging for some people. But if we think that if we could take at least one quote from each of those paragraphs, we could have at least 5 points there, couldn't we? At the very least, we could have 5. So if we could take 1 from the first paragraph, 2 from the second paragraph, 2 from that paragraph there, and then 2 from the last one, we could have 8 points, couldn't we? Okay, so the first thing that I've highlighted there is, I am very saddened. I think that's a really explicit and obvious thing there that doesn't really need any explanation. How is he trying to show us that he's finding his life difficult? Well, he says he's very sad. So if you're very sad, you are clearly finding life difficult. I've also underlined the storm that threatens weighing upon me. So as well as feeling very sad, he says he can feel a storm that threatens weighing upon me. Now, I think that's a metaphor. I don't think he's talking about an actual thunderstorm outside. What do you think that that storm might be representing? What is he talking about? The storm that threatens weighing upon me. Maybe you need to read the rest of that paragraph to make sense of it. I try to be quite good-humoured, but I am tired of this miserable place, and I feel like my life is being attacked at the very root. I am trying to work, but suffering. That last quote there, I am trying to work, but suffering, could that be evidence as to how he's trying to show us he's finding his work difficult? You could split those two up if you wanted. Yeah, do some things just show he's finding life difficult? Do some things try to show that he's finding work difficult? They're the first 2 quotes that I'm going to go with. So I'm going to start you off with those 2 examples written in a way we would expect you to write if you were doing this question in an exam. So firstly, Van Gogh shows he is clearly upset by saying explicitly he is very saddened. Nice and simple there. Secondly, he shows he is troubled and burdened as he talks about the storm that threatens weighing upon me. The metaphor suggests something is heavy on his mind. Okay, so that second one, you can see that I've explained that a little bit more. And I have mentioned that it's a metaphor. If you know for 100% fact that it's a metaphor, or it's personification, or it's a simile, then by all means say that. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. You could just say the phrase suggests something is heavy upon his mind. Why have I chosen the word heavy? Because it says weighing upon me. Yeah, it sounds like something he feels like something is going to get him. There is something that is he is anticipating, something not very nice, something that is perhaps creeping up on him, something that he obviously can't control. There's a weight on his mind, there's a weight on his shoulders. Yeah, and it's something negative, isn't it? Is he talking about his mental health? I would assume so, because I think that that's a metaphorical storm. Okay, so if you want to use those first two quotes to start you off and points, that's absolutely fine. The points that I'm making, the inference that I've made is underlined. So clearly upset. How did I get the inference? Because he's very saddened. The second one, the inference, he's troubled and burdened and something is weighing on his mind. How did I get that? Because he used that metaphor, the storm that threatened. You can put the quote first and then say this suggests and do your inference, or you can do it where I've put, I usually put the inference first. Yeah, I think Van Gogh feels like this, and here's my evidence to support it. But try and make sure you embed those keywords and phrases, just because it's a lot quicker. 8 points in total would be amazing, but just give yourself 15 minutes, okay? And just see how many points you can get in 15 minutes. Remember that text is on Google Classroom, and if you need to highlight that or anything like that, you just need to click highlight the text that you want, click on that highlighting tool, and then click whatever color that you want to highlight it in. Okay, so if you want to pause the video now, give yourself 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and go through some exemplar answers. Okay, folks, so well done. Hopefully you've had a good crack at that and you gave yourself 15 minutes, and you have managed to make all the points that you wanted. So I'm just going to go through some of the responses that I made to the question. Remember, these are not 100% completely gospel, and this is just the things that I would have said if I had been answering that question. So in addition to the first two that I used, thirdly, he uses lots of negative adjectives such as tired and miserable to describe how he feels. If you didn't know that they were adjectives describing words, you could have just put negative words. Okay, in the EDUQAS exam, you don't get credit for knowing a metaphor is a metaphor, or knowing that you can write adjective or pronoun or whatever it is, technical language that you're using. It's not an issue, okay? So don't feel like you've got to know them by heart. It's great if you do know them, and it's really good practice in general, but you don't have to. So you could have just put, he uses a lot of negative words, such as tired and miserable. I don't think that quote needs, those quotes need any more explanation. He's clearly struggling, or he wouldn't have said that he was tired and he was miserable. Fourthly, he shows he sees living as a battle when he says, my life is being attacked at the very root. Again, it's another metaphor, isn't it? Nothing is actually physically attacking him in terms of, you know, an attack, an assault, but he feels like his life is being attacked. Whether that is because of a physical illness or of mental illness, of which Van Gogh had both of those things, it does sound like he's battling every day with something. Yeah, and something is attacking. If it's attacking the very root of his being, you know, maybe it's the fundamental beliefs that he has are being attacked. So possibly he is referring to his mental state there. In addition, he shows he's unable to work despite wanting to. So when he says he tried to set to work again, but the brush was almost falling from my hands. So that one clearly shows us he's finding it difficult to work. I could have extended that a little bit, and I could have said this suggests that he is weak if the brush is almost falling from his hands. Or it might suggest that he's just lost interest. Maybe it's not because he can't physically hold the brush, he just can't be bothered. And not in like a blasé way, he can't be bothered, but as in he can't be bothered because he's struggling, and he just can't do it, even though he really wants to be productive. Okay, Van Gogh shows he has regrets about the choices he's made in his life. when he says he's too old to retrace my steps or desire something else. So he feels, and this is crazy because I think he was quite young when he died. I want to say he was only like 37 or something. He wasn't old at all. But he has regrets there, doesn't he? He thinks he's too old to do things differently. There was another one there actually that I just go in. There was another quote that suggested that he regretted things. Yeah, here. I believe that it's certainly better to bring up children than to spend all one's nervous energy in making paintings. So it's almost like he thinks he's wasted his life. He should have had a family and he should have had children, but instead he chose to be alone and paint. And of course, he would feel like that if he'd painted 900 paintings in his life and he'd only sold one. I imagine that would be awful. It's only since his death, sorry, I did say this before, didn't I, that he became very, very famous. Okay, he also sounds very hopeless when he says, I have failed in all aspects. All desire has left me, perhaps indicating that he has given up on his life and work. Yeah, so again, I mean, we've got some language here. We've got all desire has left me as personification, isn't it? Desire can't actually leave him. Do we need to talk about the personification though? Not really. I don't think it's particularly relevant here. That's why I haven't mentioned it. It just shows me that quote that he believes that he's failed and he's given up. It's that difficult. He's had to give up. He's had to give up now. Symbolized by that all desire has left. He also shows a desire to want to be alone. I think that might show that he's finding things difficult because he says he prefers to walk solitary through the churches. Additionally, he shows he's struggling to be his usual self because he says he is not the sociable creature I once was. So it's this bit at the end, isn't it? I once was. That is the key to this inference, to the usual bit, yeah? He used to be very sociable, but he's struggling to be that now because all he wants to do is be alone. We know that from that previous one. He's not the sociable creature he once was. Interesting that he calls himself a creature as well. There's quite a lot of connotations of that word, creature, and they're quite negative. So it might be interesting if somebody tried making a point about that quote, if you haven't already. And finally, Van Gogh blames himself for how he is feeling. I alone have brought all this misery on myself and others. Oh, I forgot to close the quote marks there. So I think I've got 10 points there in total. Hopefully you have got some that are similar or maybe in the same sort of ballpark. But remember, these are not points that are, as I said, completely right, and you have to just get these for you to have done well. Anything can be justified as long as you have got a quote, you are answering the question, and you are inferring from that quote. We can only infer from the evidence that we have, remember. There are lots of different inferences we could make, knowing things that we know about Van Gogh, but we can only make them about what's in the letter. You could talk about the tone of that letter if you want. It's a very sad letter, isn't it? He's clearly in a bad place. He's clearly depressed. He says that quite outright, doesn't he? In a depressed state of mind, I think he says there, more or less depressed state of mind. He's using these metaphors about how he feels attacked, how there's a storm that's threatening him. He's suffering. He doesn't want to, he can't work. He's feeling weak. He's thinking about the past. He's regretting things. And then it all just sort of snowballs into, oh, I'm an awful person and I've caused everybody problems and misery. And it's very self-indulgent. But but it's also very sad, and it clearly shows us that, you know, he's in a sad place and he's not in a great state of mind there. So you could talk about the tone of that as well. Okay, let me get back to the PowerPoint. So hopefully you've managed to make a range of different points. Before you turn this work in, I need you to do some self-assessment. I don't know why people keep skipping this part. I keep saying it is really important, because you shouldn't just be relying on your tutors to mark this. You need to be aware of what you can do well and what you need to develop too. So have you inferred Van Gogh's thoughts and feelings? And have you embedded a quote in every single point that you've made to support those thoughts and feelings? Did you track from the beginning of that letter to the end of it? And did you make a range of different points? The target was 8. So if you didn't make 8 points, obviously that could always be your feedback, couldn't it, for what you still need to develop. You need to try and make more points in the time. It's a timing issue. But try and give yourself some feedback once you've done that check-in. So what have you mastered and what do you still need to develop? That little box there on the right, ideas for feedback, they're more developmental ones if you're not sure. So please pause the video now, 5 minutes, just check those ticks, please, and then write some self-assessment feedback. What have you done well in these activities today, and what do you still need to develop? Okay, well done. So paper 2 then, we've just had a look at question 2. How does the writer? It's a 10-mark question. You have to explain how the writer presents a specific point of view using the first text, which is always a 19th century text. You've got to embed those key quotes, keywords and phrases, your quotes, your evidence to support everything that you say. Remember, if you don't use the quotes, you can't get the top marks. And for this question, you might be prompted to comment on language or tone or structure. We've talked a little bit about that today as well. Okay, so the last task is optional. For those of you that want to practice making inferences a little bit more, and as well, those of you that want to practice making inferences from language. So if you think you've sort of mastered the basics of impressions and inferences, and yes, I can say that this means that and this means that, and you want to delve a little bit deeper, this task might be good for you. So on Google Classroom, it's the, not that one, sorry. On Google Classroom, it's the other document that's there. It says Vincent lyrics inferring. Now what it is, it's practicing inferring from song lyrics. So down the left-hand side, there is a song written by a man named Don McLean, and it's called Vincent. It's about Vincent van Gogh, and the refrain in it, Starry, Starry Night, is the name of the painting that we were talking about right at the beginning. Really, really simple. I just want you to read through the song. So I've organised it as if it's a poem. So I say read each stanza. So that is a stanza. Okay. So read each stanza, and then I want you to try and summarise what you can infer from each stanza. And all you need to do is you just need to double click on the box if you want to type in it, and it will come up with a drawing, and you just click inside that box and then you can type in there. Once you've written whatever you want to write, just write save and close. You can see that the first one I've done for you just to show you what I'm talking about. So the first stanza, Starry, Starry Night, paint your palette blue and grey, look out on a summer's day with eyes that know the darkness in my soul. Shadows on the hills, sketch the trees and the daffodils, catch the breeze and the winter chills in colours on the snowy linen land. Okay, because this is a song and it's quite a poetic song, we've got a lot of language choices in here that you might want to pick out and talk about. All I've done though, I'm just trying to infer what I think this writer, Don McLean, is saying about Van Gogh, basically. So this quote here, darkness in my soul, that might refer to Van Gogh's experience with depression. Van Gogh painted landscapes in all kinds of weather. How have I inferred that? Well, he talks about a summer's day and winter chills. So that implies that Van Gogh painted all year round. I also inferred that his paintings are very colourful because it said blue and grey, daffodils, and daffodils are bright yellow, aren't they? And it also says in colours, and that last bit on the snowy linen land. We've got some alliteration there, the linen land, snowy. Snowy is white, isn't it? What does white represent? Think about what we were talking about in that painting earlier. We said that darkness or blackness implies a deadness or a darkness or mystery or fear. So what does white represent? Is that innocence? Is that cleanliness, virginity? So you could maybe do some things like that. We've got blue and grey again. Colours are great ones to think about. So if you want to do a little bit more practice on inferring meaning or analysing language, have a look at the next stanza, think about what it means, and then maybe write some of your responses in the box next to it. If you don't understand or you can't do one of them, don't worry, just click and do whichever ones that you can, but you do need to double click it to open it up and then press save. What I'll do is I'll actually I'll put on the YouTube video actually of the song if you want to listen to it. It's a very sad song, very poignant song, and I think you might enjoy it. Obviously, it's quite an old song. It was released in 1971, but yeah, quite moving actually when you listen to the lyrics and you listen to the song. I don't know what kind of music you're into. You might enjoy it. So if you want to have a go at making inferences, song lyrics are a really good alternative, especially if you like music as well, because once you get the hang of doing that, you might then be able to choose some of your own favourite songs, which are probably completely different to Don McLean, but you could analyse language or inferences in those songs, because it's a skill that you can then just transfer to looking at poems, or looking at a letter, or looking at a short story, for example, like we've been practicing in class. Okay, so what have we done in this session? We've understood and recapped question 1 and question 2 in paper 2. Remember, question 1 is where we look at that obvious information in a non-fiction text, and it's 1A, 1B, 1C. And then question 2 is where we have to explain how the writer expresses their thoughts and feelings. We do this by saying the writer thinks this, and then we give a quote, and then we say this suggests, etc. So that's about the inferring meanings. And we've organised our ideas, hopefully, into clear and coherent sentences. So well done, everybody. Appreciate your hard work today. Once you've finished everything, just make sure you turn it in Google Classroom. Remember, you might need to press open assignment or view assignment, but you should have a turn it in button where you can hand in your answers, and if you chose to do the lyrics one as well. Okay, that's all for today. I will see you next week. Thanks very much. See you later.